Have you ever been told life is all about serving others? Well, some people need to hear that regularly. And some people, like me or you, if you're listening to this podcast, are more kind girls, and we actually don't need to hear that regularly. Because what happens is serving is easy. And we end up serving and serving at the expense of ourselves all the time, and over caring and over giving and getting exhausted and tolerating bad behavior and all those things which can be destructive of ourselves. We can become people pleasers with this message and become eventually what's called a high functioning codependent. So definitely not the message that us kind girls need to hear. Life is about serving others. While service is important, a balance is way more important, and understanding the order of things is way more important. So first of all, I'm going to be doing a 4-part series on self-love, and this is the first one, is loving ourselves selfish. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So if this message rings a bell to you and you know somebody else that would be benefited by this message, then please pass it on, because that's how this message and this podcast grows, and that's what I'm all about, helping others grow 1% at a time. So where do we even get this message? I think this is an interesting thing to think about and talk about. So we could get it from our families. I feel like, I even did it to myself, my kids. It's like, hey, are you thinking of your brother and sister? Which actually is super important, because I had one particular child that definitely wasn't naturally wanting to think of anybody. And so that was super important in training. The challenge is we're dealing with different personalities. My oldest daughter was a naturally serving, caring person, and she didn't need to hear that message all the time, because her challenge was not serving and caring for others. It was caring for herself and knowing what she needed. So it could be from our family. It could be society in general. I feel like as females, this is kind of pressed on us a little bit, that, life is about serving others. If you come from a Christian religion or a religious background, I feel like that's kind of a popular thing that we hear, is it's all about serving others and being in community, which has its place and is super valuable. But again, to the kind girl, that is not the message we need to hear all the time. So my whole story is, again, I was in a destructive marriage for 22 years, my husband, and I served and served and served, and it was very unbalanced. So I was tolerating bad behavior and serving to the point where I was having physical symptoms, having a lot of physical illnesses, and then mental symptoms. And it was very, very stressful, where basically I was tolerating bad behavior and walking on eggshells, and it was just causing me to be in a fight-flight state, which was horrible for my nervous system. And I, believed I was doing the right thing, but the consequences told me that there was something wrong. So I had to rethink all of that. I, wasn't able to get my husband on board with all of that, and we ended up getting a divorce. Now I'm remarried, which is interesting, because it took a lot of time to heal, because I felt like, I was 50% of the problem, and I had a big kind girl bullseye on my forehead saying to anyone selfish and narcissistic, please, be attracted to me because I love to serve you. So I had to work on that bullseye and do a lot of work. My husband now, we are very equal. We both love to serve, and we're both kind to one another, and we have a very loving, respectful relationship that's healthy for us both. And just a dramatic difference. It's really fun for me to be in this state where we can work through problems, and we have love and equality and respect, and compared to the very unbalanced relationship that I came from, and he did as well, because we're both coming from divorced relationships. So pretty interesting. So really, though, I really believe that this is important to love ourselves first, not in a selfish way, where we're chronically being selfish. But that's not the message that kind girls need to hear. We need to love others as we love ourselves. And so what we need to do is start by loving ourselves. And that is super important. And that's also I just think that there's so much wisdom in ancient books, but especially I'm biased. I love the Bible. And Jesus said it very clearly. What's the greatest commandment? And it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And they're like, well, what's the second greatest one? It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. Super important to love yourself first before you can love someone else more fully. And really, we're the ones that know ourselves the best, or we should. I took it was a while where I had to kind of relearn myself. And it's like, what do I want? What do I like? What is important to me? What makes me angry? What are my core values? I had to kind of rediscover that because I'd kind of lost that along the way as I spent all my time serving others. But really, that's like the idea of put on your own oxygen mask first. If you were to get an airplane, there was a problem, put on your own oxygen mask first before you can assist others with their oxygen mask. So it's really filling our tank and being responsible for ourselves before we start realizing that we have the energy and time and we're serving others in a way that's actually out of true love. So what are the things that get in the way with loving ourselves? Well, I would say that the number one thing is wrong belief system. And that was definitely the number one thing for me. I had just been chronically, trained that it's all about serving others and that's the highest and best good. And I kind of put myself in the way, way, way background. So wrong belief system, another one that can really affect loving ourselves are our past stories and traumas. So it's really unfortunate that younger than the age of 7, anything that happens into our lives, kids will blame themselves. And so we can create these stories that aren't actually even true, but we've adopted these ideas where I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, my thoughts and feelings don't matter. Especially if you were grown up in an environment where children were seen and not heard, things like that. So we can create it doesn't even have to be big traumas or anything. It could be just, regular messages. So it could be past stories or it could be traumas. Also, it could be just the people around us. Like I think, I was in a church for a while that was really, pushing that a lot and really against the whole idea of loving self because that was selfish. And so that people around us can make a big difference. I know my husband was definitely along those lines. Also, I think it can just be a bad habit because like having to think of yourself, your like wants, needs, desires, to be able to voice feelings, to be able to advocate for what's important to us it can be challenging. Like for me, I did not have the vocabulary to be able to say, I'd like to bring something up. Let's talk about this, and this is something that's important to me, and this is why, and this is, I'm going to advocate for it. And I just really didn't even have the words or the methods to do that. And that's super important too. I really think the book Boundary Boss by Terry Cole was super helpful because she has some scripts in there that really helped practically say, how to go about putting up boundaries that are healthy for ourselves. So that was really helpful. For me, my life was the kind girl, doing the right things, being a Christian, marrying a Christian guy. And really, the relationship was very destructive to me. And I ended up in the psych ward twice and got labeled bipolar at the time. And it was just a very challenging, awful situation. And so there wasn't mutuality in working things out. And so I chose a divorce. And then I just questioned myself. I questioned all the whys and questioned my beliefs that got me there and all of my people pleasing and my serving, and really had to rediscover myself and healthy relationship with God and myself and others. And it was a process. So I created the Unravel notebook, and that was the process that helped me go from that situation to living a life abundantly as a realtor and a life coach and really thriving in a beautiful marriage. And that's what I want to help others do as well and create their life by intention to live brighter one day at a time. So what happens when a kind girl gets wounded regularly? I've talked about like the physical symptoms. I've talked about like it can cause depression, anxiety, all those things. But one of the big things that's super important, that's an indicator that something is off, is resentment. So if we're like over giving, saying yes when we really want to be saying no, things like that, we start to notice a resentment in us. And that can be super helpful because that emotion is just information. The challenging part is when that resentment is chronically happening, it can turn into bitterness. And bitterness is an interesting thing because, in the Bible, God has lots of emotions, and most emotions have a good side and a not so healthy side. Like they have different aspects. They're just information. But it's interesting, bitterness is actually pretty much just a dark emotion. Like it's just chronically resentment, bitterness, and it just starts basically like a cancer eating away at us. So there's really not anything really helpful about bitterness. So it's really important to be like, okay, are there areas I'm bitter? Are there things where I'm feeling resentment? And then being like, there's something there where I did not advocate for myself, where I was wronged, where I, need to either put up boundaries, forgive, whatever I need to do. But clearing that out of our body is super helpful because it's bitterness is like will change our whole way we view life and the world and everything. So it can be very, very destructive. And what happens is, I've known, there's a gal I know, Sheila, and Sheila was married to a narcissist and actually still is married to the narcissist. And even though they're living in different locations, and she just admits that she's like super bitter, and she was just a natural kind girl. That was kind of the way she was raised, who she is. And she's never taken ownership of all those of herself and the choices and stuff like that. And she is bitter to the point where it's just keeping her captive in her home, in her environment, and she's not able to flourish like she could. So bitterness is like a really good red flag for ourselves, being like, hey, there's something wrong, and we need to make some changes. And I think of it like, you can get the sweetest little dog, I always think of a sweet little dog. But if you put them in a corner and like just are constantly, chronically being mean to them, I don't know if you've ever seen kids mean to a dog. That just makes me really upset when I see that. But that's kind of like a kind girl. Like you can have the kindest dog, but if you're chronically being like attacked, that dog is going to lash out no matter what. And I totally felt like that little dog in the corner when I was in the thick of my previous relationship. And it just felt terrible. And it was just an awful, awful feeling. But that's kind of the vision I get from like being chronically with a narcissist or selfish people or people that are just chronically, wanting to control you and manipulate you for their own good. And so that's just not a good place to be. So what are some 4 things we can help with ourselves as far as knowing how to love ourselves and how to do this in a way that is healthy for ourselves? Well, first of all, I would say the Unravel notebook that is available on Amazon is super helpful, and that's something that I designed that helped me through the whole unraveling my mind after being in a destructive relationship. But really, it don't have to be in a destructive relationship. It's kind of like getting rid of that kind girl bullseye. And even in part of it, it's like, well, what's important to you? What are thoughts? What are, situations? What are values? What are things you like and don't like? It's just a way to reconnect and unravel ourselves so that we can live a life by design and flourish and thrive. So that's really helpful. But within that, I think the most important thing is taking ownership. Like owning, like kind girls, my goodness, we get take advantage of quite a bit. And a lot of times we allow it. So really owning where we're at, owning our situation, owning our past, present, and future, and not and that we really are the sum of our choices, and that we do actually can own our choices, own where we're at, and then we have the freedom to change 1% at a time and change our thinking. But I think owning my side of the situation rather than blaming my husband on his part was super, super important for my healing journey and knowing how to, self-love and serve others. So the Unravel notebook and owning it. So that would be the second thing. just choosing to reiterate true beliefs. Like once you've eradicated or realize, hey, that belief is like faulty and I don't want it, the more you can reiterate the true belief, the better. So one that I did was I'm enough. And so I did that, like I had it on my phone, I had it on my mirror, and you can still go to my website and get the affirmations, and that's one of them, the free affirmations, and that's I am enough. And so just reiterating that over and over and over, because I had definitely adopted an idea or a belief that I was not enough. And that was what allowed me to chronically overserve and not keep that in balance. So choosing to reiterate the belief, like I am worthy, I am safe, or whatever it is that's getting in the way from you loving yourself in a healthy way. I think Marissa Peer, she has some hypnotherapy things you can listen to on I Am Enough. She did the I Am Enough movement, and so that's really helpful too. And I'm a life coach, and I'm also a hypnotherapist through Marissa Peer, because one thing I realized as I was life coaching is how much these belief systems can kind of, you can consciously be like, yeah, I'm enough, and I totally can believe this, but there's some chronic subconscious things going on where it's chronically like poking holes in that. And what I realized is, gosh, I wanted to find a way that I could put the conscious mind to sleep a little bit and make the subconscious more aware and increase awareness so that we could reprogram that pretty quickly. Because I was like, wow, as a life coach, I could be working with people for a year, and this underlying belief that even though consciously they're like, yeah, I agree that that is a wrong belief, the subconscious was just chronically just causing problems. And I'd be working with people for a very long time. Versus with hypnotherapy, it's like a kind of a one and done sort of situation. You just go back, figure out where your mind and body decided that that belief served them, and kind of root it out, and then kind of retrain your brain to think differently. So that's pretty positive. So again, self-love is not selfish, and self-love starts with like considering your thoughts, feelings, and who you are as valuable and important. And the next thing is making time to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The next one is like talking to ourselves in a way that is loving, like a friend would do. And that's the pieces of self-love. So that's what I've got for you today. Life is all about growing 1% at a time, and I believe in you. Live brighter.